Guys, today we're going to be looking at Dr. Jordan Peterson and his recent court decision where he has to go for retraining. Kind of a long video, but trust me, it is worth it to watch the whole thing. Why do I say this? Because there's good energy. So just feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme. It's Jamaican bobsled time.
Dad, nice to see you.
Hey, Mick, how you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
Good, actually. All things considered, I'm in Milwaukee, looking forward to the presidential debate tonight. That's fun. I'm perplexed, I would say, about the situation in Canada.
Look at the suit he's wearing. He's got like crazy suits now. Like his suits are wild. Like he's got that what is it? Two-Face from the from Batman and like DC Comics. It's like the suit that's half one color and half another color. He's just got like crazy ass suits. Kind of reminds me of Don Cherry. If anybody knows Don Cherry, if you're Canadian and you watch hockey, you know Don Cherry.
I've been thinking about it this morning. As you know, the court that we appealed the College of Psychologists' decision to decided that the college it's within the college's purview to stop me from having any political opinions, as far as I can tell. The decision, which I posted on Twitter and will post in the description of this video, starts out by making a case for the fundamental reality of freedom of speech for Canadians in Canada, and then says, but, and that's always a bad start when you're talking about freedom of speech, but apparently the college has the right to decide that I can be re-educated forcibly with the risk of my license, essentially because I made political statements that the members of the college don't agree with. And those opinions involve two criticisms of Justin Trudeau, one criticism of his chief of staff, one criticism of an Ottawa city councillor, and then my objection on Joe Rogan to the climate apocalyptic fear-mongering that idiot tyrants are foisting on the general population. Now, apparently that makes me unprofessional and a disgrace to the profession, such that I am now going to be required, the college can go ahead with this, to put me into a re-education program with their so-called social media experts. And that's also, by the way, a profession that does not exist, until I learn my lesson, whatever that is, regardless of how much time that takes, by their judgment. Or
just a little upset, just slightly.
Or they can take my license away. And so the court says, well, of course you have freedom of speech, Dr. Peterson, but because you're a professional, you're bound by your professional organization. And apparently they're not bound, even though they're a government organization, fundamentally. Apparently they're not bound by that fundamental constitutional axiom. And so that shows you, all you Canadians who are listening, and everyone outside of the country who might be the least bit interested in Canada, that shows you exactly what our bloody Constitution is worth. And if Canadians are so daft that they don't think that that's a problem, well, they're going to figure it out over the next 15 years, because there's absolutely no excuse for this. So that's what I'm thinking. Now, there's part of me that's thinking, well, look, Peterson, the College of Psychologists is after you. You've taken it to court. Now the judges have decided that you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. And I think, well, I expressed political sentiment and I'm actually informed. And so for the life of me, I can't see how I'm wrong. I think I have a responsibility to say what I think, and I think many people agree with that. And I think the fundamental consequence of that around the world has been massively beneficial to people. So I think, number one, what the hell? And number two, bring it on and see what happens. Because I will make absolutely every bit of this public in a way that the college and the courts can hardly even imagine. So away we go. So that's how I'm doing.
So to me, when I think about, what he could do to make it public, is he's going to put everything on YouTube.
That's how you're doing. Okay, but good.
Yeah, but good.
Michaela Peterson, his daughter, I swear, she just seems like this person who has like a kind of like a good sense of humor, kind of a lighthearted person. I don't really consider her like that great of an interviewer, but also I feel like I feel like we share that in common. Like we're just too, I don't know, silly. Like, or we hear things that are silly, and then we just start laughing, or we have like, we like dumb down things. And I don't think that makes for a good interviewer. I saw her in one interview where Dr. Peterson was talking to somebody else, and they said a bunch of stuff, and then she's like, oh, I got something to add, and he's like, not right now. Like, he wanted to finish his speech or his point, finishes it, and then she's like, oh, well, the moment's gone now. Well, what was it? Oh, it was just a joke. It was like the only thing she was gonna add the whole session. I was like, the whole time she was there, she didn't add anything. And then she had like this one joke, and it just got derailed.
But, I mean, look, the court decision was worse than I thought it would be. I was already pessimistic. I figured the court would take the coward's way out and basically upbraid the college for procedural inadequacy. Because one of the things the college did, which is just beyond comprehension as far as I'm concerned, is pursue these complaints that were put forward by people distributed all over the world, who then claimed in writing falsely to be my clients, when in fact they were never my clients. And not only were they not my clients, they had nothing to do with anyone who was ever a client of mine. And so I figured at least the court would say, well, of course you have the right to police professionals because you're a professional governing body, but they didn't even do that. They just basically said, well, of course you have the right to freedom of speech, except when it comes to, let's say, political opinions. So, then what right do you have at all?
Oh, well, let's review what it says in the article. Sorry, I'm not good at legal terms. Here's what it says. Provision number 2, freedom of expression. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including the freedom of the press and other media of communication. That kind of seems pretty clear, but they're saying, well, you're a professional now. You're licensed by this professional body. So what? Don't you dare, sir. Do not you dare embarrass us, because whatever you say comes against us, which I guess is kind of true, but isn't that just what people do in society today to shut people up? They're like, hey, look what this Black Lives Matter protester did. They did this. Aha, all of Black Lives Matter is bad. Or whatever group you want to, I just thrown out like an example, right? So in this case, because he is part of this organization, oh, well, you're making this, these people look bad. You're making us look bad.
And, it's terrible, Michaela, because I know perfectly well from talking to many physicians in particular, but also lawyers and psychologists, that no one in Canada, arguably, and this is also extremely strange, it's surreal, there's no one in Canada except me that's actually in a position to fight this, because it's hyper expensive, and I don't know if my insurance will cover it. It's hyper expensive. It's stressful. It's complex. It's time consuming. It could involve the suspension of my license. And there's not really anything that can be done to me that's a threat. I'm not serving as a clinician. I don't have a practice anymore because that became impossible, even though I love doing it. And I'm also not very happy about that.
He's got FU money, essentially. He's got FU money. So he's just like, look, you could do this, but I have other avenues. I don't need my license per se. Obviously, he wants to have it so he can say that he is a licensed clinician, psychologist, etc. But if he lost it, it's not like he's screwed. If you think about somebody who's just working as a psychologist or a clinician, obviously they make good money, but as soon as you take their job away, they don't make good money. So they don't want to go down that road.
So I'm like the person who can do this. And Canadians have no idea to what degree professionals in Canada are now required not to say what they think or to lie outright. So, for example, therapists are required by law to lie about, let's say, the gender identity of minors.
I knew that was coming. I was going to say the gender, picking your gender for kids or whatever when they come in and they're like, I feel like I'm a girl or I feel like I'm a whatever. And they're like, yeah. Okay, you feel that way? Cool. I mean, I don't know enough about it to say if that's really what happens and there's no checking. So, I mean, I'll just take his word for it because I've heard it so many times. I do not know if that's real, if that's actually what happens. If people want to comment down below with firsthand experiences or something like that, that'd be great. It's mind-boggling that that's actually how it would be, that you would just go there and be like, hey, I feel like I'm a woman. Okay, yeah, you are. We're not going to check nothing, just you're a woman now. Cool.
And so for me, especially on the therapy side, if you're required by law and by your professional organization to lie cowardly, you're done as a therapist, because the only thing you've got as a therapist is honesty. That's it. Honesty is what's curative. So, you know, it's just part of how surreal the world is, and particularly how surreal Canada is. It's hard to fathom.
Honesty and the truth is curative. And I just think about like when I was in therapy or couples therapy, whatever, and they would sit down there and say, well, your ex or, this person or all these people or whatever it is says this about you. All these people are saying this about you. And they'd say, like, is there any truth in that? Like, do you think that maybe you are that way and that's why people keep telling you that? And you're like, oh, no, can't possibly. I can't possibly be that way. And then through those sessions, you realize that, no, actually, yeah, like people say that about you, or that person is saying that to you. Maybe they're not communicating it properly. They could do a better job. They're saying it when they're upset and they're already ready to blow up. So they say like, oh, you don't wash the dishes or whatever it is. And but the idea is that you actually let the person sit with that and be like, look, let's investigate this. Do you actually not do that? Do you do this, etc.? And you find out that, yeah, there's truth in what somebody's saying. Now, maybe it's not to the same extent of what they're blowing it up to be, but there is areas where you can improve and do better. And if you're always ending up in relationships or something that suck, and there's a common pattern that you pick shitty people, well, you should be looking at yourself. And people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. They don't want to take that in and be like, oh, really? Like, I need to fix something? It's everybody else. Everybody else needs to fix. They're all wrong. You don't want to think that you have issues that you want to work on.
It is hard to fathom. Can I read just a couple of sentences from the decision so people have an idea of what's in here? It's linked below. People can read the entire thing. But there's parts, like this is how it begins. When individuals join a regulated profession, they do not lose their charter right to freedom of expression. At the same time, however, they take on obligations and must abide by the rules of their regulatory body that may limit their freedom of expression.
Yes. Yes, of course. Because you're a professional and you're representing them. Just like at a workplace, I can't go into the workplace and be like, calling people like a bunch of F-bombs and pissing people off, like I should act in a certain way. And I get that. They're saying, hey, we're going to have to let you go from the licensing body here, the College of Psychologists, because you are not following the rules. Unless you take this training and you change, basically. It really depends on what he was saying and doing. Like, was he really being that bad? And I did a whole video on all the allegations, not allegations, all the complaints that were done to him. And to me, it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, if anything, it was like he outlined in the beginning, it was more political. He was expressing political views. Or maybe more right-wing views when he talks about not Ellen, because he's not Elliot. Elliot Page. They hate the fact so much that somebody has a difference of opinion than them or doesn't agree with them that they're like, you're not allowed to talk. It's just so wild to me. Like, I don't get it. I don't know how it bothers them so much. They're like, you can't speak anymore. You're not allowed. No speaking for you.
That's just one sentence after another. That's how it starts.
Yeah, perfect. It's a great thing to highlight. You know, it's like, well, you have this fundamental right, but what? What rules? There's a rule, eh? There's a rule. Is that right? That the College of Psychologists has, that I can't criticize Justin Trudeau on Twitter.
How dare you try to criticize our king and leader, our emperor, the man. He's not even a man, he's a god. Our god, Justin Trudeau, sir. Sir, how dare you? How dare you? It's people kind, okay, not humankind. God, get it right, Dr. Jordan Peterson.
So we'd like you to...
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go.
That's a rule, is it? And if someone anywhere in the world complains about the fact that I've criticized Justin Trudeau, let's say, that all of a sudden that's a rule, even though it wasn't a rule. And of course I get to criticize Justin Trudeau.
No, you don't, sir, because you are a professional. And as a professional, you got to shush those lips.
Not only because he richly deserves it in every way you can possibly imagine, but because that's actually what freedom of speech means.
You know what? If you criticized Pierre Poilievre more, and it was equal, and Jagmeet Singh or other leaders of our political parties, then maybe we would let you get a freebie in on Justin Trudeau. But you don't, sir. You just lick their boots. You lick their boots. You're sucking up. Okay? You need to be even-handed with all your criticism, and you're not.
So I have no idea what the court means by, abiding by the rules. So the rules are whatever the bloody College of Psychologists determines constitutes a rule after the fact, given their complete freedom to make manifest any rules they want.
Yeah.
It's beyond comprehension.
This is like the whole thing when people were allowed with COVID to work from home and then they didn't want to come back to the office. And they were like, well, now we got a rule. You have to come back in, even though you're fully capable of doing your job remotely. You have to come back in now. I have one friend who was just like, no. He's like, no, I'm not coming back. I'm staying from home. He even moved to a different place. And they were just like, they went after him. They were like, hey, HR meetings, meeting with vice presidents and blah, whatever. And at the end of it all, they were like, well, you're still technically doing your job to an exemplary level. We can't, you haven't done anything wrong. You're just not listening to this rule we made up that you need to be in office. Well, we can't do anything about that right now. So this is just letting you know, buddy, you're on thin ice.
And yes, but I have freedom of speech. It's like, do I now? What do I get to talk about? Apparently, I can't even talk about the weather. Here's another fact.
Does it involve Justin Trudeau? Because if you're talking about the forest fires, you're like, look, it's not raining. We got forest fires. And they're like, Trudeau, he's supposed to be dealing with these forest fires. Ban him now. He's got, by association, he's talking about Trudeau because he started this committee to deal with forest fires.
This is literally the truth. People can submit a complaint to the college.
Wait, were the other parts not true? I'm sorry.
Of psychologists from anywhere in the world. And so someone in the States submitted a complaint about the last conversation I had with Joe Rogan, where I expressed my doubts about the validity of economic predictions based on climate science. The complainant submitted the entire transcript, right? A 3-hour conversation as evidence of my unprofessional behavior.
I literally went through this in my video, and it's exactly like he said. And they put timestamps in their complaints, and they were like, at this point, he talked about monkeys and blah, 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 this. And I was like, what the hell? I'll link the video. It's so dumb.
And the college, which did not have to pursue that complaint, went forward with it. So, like, okay, I talked to Joe for 3 hours. Apparently, everything I said in that 3 hours was unprofessional and a disgrace to the profession.
Yes, because, and I remember the reason why they put it in the complaint, that they were saying, well, Dr. Jordan Peterson came on there as a licensed psychologist, and so he is representing psychologists on the Joe Rogan podcast because he's on there, because that's what he is, and he said, this is what I am when he started the podcast off. So everything he talked about in that podcast is a reflection on the College of Psychologists in Ontario. And this is the issue, because he talked about climate science, he talked about monkeys, he talked about whatever else he talked about, vaccines. I can't remember all the stuff he talked about. And so he was speaking as a psychologist, and what does psychologists know about any of this? Oh my God! This is how I picture the person there, like freaking out. That's their point. Oh my God! Why is he talking about that? And then they have to write the big complaint. Dude, this is what happened. I just imagine like they're profusely sweating, their faces all red, they're just furiously typing. How could you say this?
So, like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? The answer is, well, we're going to appeal the decision. I will take this to the Supreme Court. I don't think that any judges will have either the wisdom or the courage to rule about this properly, except at the Supreme Court level. And I'm not particularly optimistic about that either.
I'm not optimistic about that either. I don't see how you can win this without overturning colleges in general. And I don't, like, that's not a good look for the colleges to lose this. So won't the Supreme Court, I know they're not supposed to be pressured, but won't they, what's the benefit for them for ruling in your favor? Other than
the
withholding
benefit would
freedom
be
of
that
speech.
they would support the most fundamental principle of a free society, right? It's like, why do you have the right to freedom of speech? Well, the answer is because there's no difference between free speech and thinking, no difference between free speech and dialogue, and no difference between free speech and problem solving and negotiation. And therefore peace. If you eliminate that, people can no longer think, they can no longer adapt, they can no longer negotiate, they no longer even know how to orient themselves in the world.
I think it really depends, though, how you're saying something. If you're saying it like you're leaving it open-ended, like you're not sure about something, you're like, well, I think we should do this. Ha, 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 ha. And they're like, well, actually, that's a dumb idea. We should do this. Ha, 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 ha. And then you just go back and forth. That's different. But if you're like, I have this conviction and you are all wrong and I am all right and this is how it's going to be and we're going to do this, then, that's not really like opening dialogue. It's like somebody just crossing their arms like, I don't care. I'm right.
And so, in principle, the advantage for the Supreme Court is that they rule in favor of the most fundamental principle upon which civil democracy itself is predicated. Now, I don't think we have the right to free speech in Canada. I think this decision today demonstrates that obviously. I saw the same thing with the Law Society in Canada.
We don't have it. We do not have it. Like I said before, the only place that seems to have it is the United States, but even there, they have like bullshit that happens. So like, it's not real. And if you just think about history, like when did we ever have free speech ever in everdom? Like we didn't. Everybody was like, you're ruled by a king, but you're ruled by somebody, let's say, who's a good ruler. You don't really have freedom of speech. You were just lucky, maybe, and they were like, "Oh, I have a good sense of humor. You made fun of me. You called me a fat pig. Okay, ha ha ha." But like, realistically, they leave, and it's like somebody else comes in. They're like, "Shit, you call me a fat pig? I'm chopping off your hands." Like that was how things happened in days gone by, and it's only more of a recent thing that we do this. So no, you don't have it, and you're lucky if you have it within your own family, where you sit down at a dinner table or whatever, or talk to your relatives, and you're like, "Hey, I think this," and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool, we'll have this conversation. I think this," and they don't like yell at you and scream at you and cut you off and like, "We can't talk because you have different beliefs and values than me." Like, and that's your family, your freaking family, which is like the one place where you're supposed to kind of be able to have those discussions.
Partly was why I'm not surprised at this ruling. I've been through this before, and I see that Canada's walked down that idiot path for at least 30 years. So our country is in, well, this is where I start to get doubtful. It's like either I'm wrong or the country is in trouble. Now, to tell you the truth, I would rather be wrong, but I've thought it through. It's like, okay, what did I do exactly? None of my clients complained. That has nothing to do with this. And I expressed my political opinions, which I have a right to do, which I believe were correct. I think that, and Canadians agree with this now. The last poll indicated that Canadians believe that Justin Trudeau is the worst prime minister we've ever had.
Well, I think we knew that for at least a year or so now. I mean, he's the most unpopular prime minister, only beaten by himself. At different points, he's beaten himself in the record of setting the least popular prime minister. So he is smart with how he wins votes. He focuses on the areas that have a lot of seats. So when the election comes, he doesn't worry about like rural areas and places that aren't going to get him the biggest bang for the buck, essentially. And so he just like goes for the big places like Toronto. Cities are usually more liberal anyways, these big cities, and then he just gets it, and then he's like, "Oh, cool, like I got, 180 seats now, and I needed whatever the number is to pass, and I'm good. And so if I get some more, great. If I don't, well, I'm already good," because, he really targets areas like that. And this is not exclusive to Canada. We see that, I look at the U.S. Elections, and they're kind of similar in that way. So I don't know. It's like people figure out strategies like, how can we get elected? Like they literally hire these consultants and people to make strategies on how to get yourself elected. I'm not surprised that somebody has like figured out like, oh, I know how to game the system, or like how to like really get the maximum advantage in this system.
Well, that was sort of my point a year ago, And so if I can't say that, and yet a majority of Canadians believe it to be true. And believe me, a lot more of them are going to believe that. A lot more are going to believe that in the relatively near future. In what sense do I have anything even approximating freedom of speech? And if I can't have that opinion, and therefore, in principle, no one can, then what do we do when we're stuck with a prime minister, let's say, who everyone has decided is the worst prime minister the country's ever had?
I voted Justin Trudeau the first time he got elected, mainly because he was legalizing weed and we were getting another holiday. And I was like, I actually like the idea that there was this sort of family connection with his father, and that his father was a prime minister and stuff. And I'm going to be honest, like I didn't know anything else about his policies and shit. I wasn't following stuff. What has it been like? 12 years ago or something, the first time we voted on him. And I think at the time, regardless of what you think of him now, at the time, I think having a progressive, or more progressive, maybe, I don't know how progressive you want to consider Justin Trudeau, but a more progressive politician come in and make some changes and do some things, pass some policies and kind of move us a little more in a certain direction was good. I don't think that was a bad thing per se. I think it's good that you get some of that in, because you need to progress things. So yeah, okay, we do certain things, fine, move it along. But when it comes to this re-elections and continuing. It just feels like he's been in there too long. It's just like his benefits are wearing off. He was good for a short term, for that one term, get the 4 years, boom, do this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Now let's get somebody else in. That's how I think about it. Ideally, probably would have been better. The problem is, even if you're somebody who's like, I don't want a conservative, and fine, that's fine. I'm not saying it has to be a conservative, but Trudeau won't get rid of the Liberal seat. He's not going to be like, I'm not going to be the prime minister. I'm not going to run to be the prime minister. He wants to just keep his job and re-elected for forever. We don't have term limits here like in the United States, so you can't serve 2 4-year terms as the president, then you're done. It's like you could literally run forever. As long as people keep voting for you, you can just be prime minister until you die. or incapacitated or something. I don't think there's any limits. So I just think get him in for the 4 years. He did some stuff. Fine, cool, okay. Now we need to change out. And I'd be fine if it was another liberal person, just not someone as weird and crazy as he's gotten. We could have had somebody else liberal, but he won't back out. So where do you go? Who is the next logical person who's going to get elected? Well, it's only ever been conservatives and liberals who've gotten elected ever in Canada. So you're like, well, it has to be the conservative. Then we have this shitty conservative people that were running. The guy with the curly hair from Saskatchewan. Curly hair? Doesn't he have curly hair? Seemed like that kid at school, it's just the kid's laughing and giggling. And when he beat Maxime Bernier for the leader of the Conservative Party, to get the leadership, he drank the thing of milk and rubbing it in his face, because that was the whole thing between them when they were running for leadership of the Conservative Party was, the milk and dairy, the eggs and dairy, I can't remember the term, coalition, whatever it is, organizations were supporting this other guy. So Maxime Bernier was like, oh, they shouldn't be giving all this money to him. They want to increase, milk and egg prices or whatever. And so he wins and he's drinking the milk. He's like, hey, Maxime Bernier, drink the milk. I don't know. It's just classic example of him just being stupid. I mean, it's something you would do to your friend. You know what I mean? As a joke. But as a representative. And it's just so stupid, especially when this guy is the vote was down to 0.5%. It was 50.5 to 49.5 vote split. Maybe you should just settle down, bro.
Well,
Move. Run, if you can.
well, this is another reason, why I'm in a position that I can fight this, because
Okay, I'm going to stop again because I'm just on rants today. It must be this coffee I'm drinking. I don't know. When she says move and run, I'm like, yeah, we can all move and run. You can literally run away from problems. But then nothing ever gets fixed, right? You're not going to fix the country if you just run away from it. So we all need to take responsibility for the people who live here and try to actually fix it and make it better. You don't just be like, peace, I'm out. You guys deal with all these issues. We all need to do our part. And when people do shitty stuff, we need to hold them accountable. And ultimately, we don't do that. And perhaps you could say this is an example right now with Jordan Peterson of people holding him accountable. Now, I don't agree with what they're holding him accountable for, so I wish there was a way that, I could provide in my example, right? Because I don't agree. I could provide, counter information to these complaints about him and say, you know what, actually, I've read his books, I've listened to his podcasts, I've gone to his different talks here when he was in town, and he was extremely helpful to me in my life and my experience, getting through the experiences that I had, and I just find him a very valuable resource. Do I think he's right about everything? No, obviously not, because nobody is. But he's been very helpful. And so I would like you to take that in consideration. And we could have gotten all these people who have the same feelings or whatever feelings they have, provide that information. And, it could counterbalance this. Because ultimately, like he said, when I reviewed all these complaints, I can't remember how many there was now. I feel like it was in the 20s. They weren't his clients. They were about random shit. Elliot Page and how he... was commenting about political figures and
The worst thing that could happen is the college can take away my license. Now, I already know that if my license gets taken away, there are other jurisdictions that will grant me a license the next day. And there's a real comedic element to that, because I could lose my license in Ontario and instantly be licensed in at least 3 other jurisdictions. And so that's not going to look very good with regard to the Ontario College of Psychologists.
Well, at least they got rid of you.
come to Alberta, Jordan Peterson, get licensed here.
Well, and fair enough. And if that's what they want, I mean, the other problem that the college is going to face is that, and I don't know exactly what they're going to make of this, but all the people who are involved in this prosecution are going to find very soon that this will eat their life. So,
from a media perspective,
I've offered to the college to negotiate. I actually have a solution in mind, and I've heard the odd comment indicating that maybe that's a possibility. I reached out a month ago with an idea. They haven't got back to me. I think they're waiting for this decision, to tell you the truth. And of course, they're going to be entirely emboldened by this. I know the solution, which I'm not going to discuss in this podcast. I have to talk to them first. I have a reasonable solution. But, and I also know, or think I know, you might ask, well, why is the college doing this?
It's interesting that he says, hey, if Ontario kicks me out, I could go to 3 other places. Now, yet to be seen if that's true. But if that is the case, what does that say about Ontario? Interesting. It is so interesting, guys.
And my suspicions are, because we've been through this before, when Cambridge University canceled the seminar I was going to conduct there on Exodus, I found out eventually that it was basically one person who was behind all of that. There were 2 more that were associated with
positions of power. See how they affect things. All those activists were right.
That person, who are pushing the college to go after me for whatever the hell their reasons are. Maybe they disagree with my political opinions, particularly on the trans front. And that was the tweet, I think, that really probably initiated all this, right? I tweeted about Elliot Page. And so I'm perfectly happy that I tweeted that particular tweet.
I love how he had to stop there, because I did the same thing. I was like, Elliot. It's because you know them as one, and then you gotta switch it. And I guess after a while you get used to it, but it's just initially what is it? Oh.
And I also think in 5 years, nobody will admit that they were ever in favor of any of this, right? This is far worse than the lobotomies of the 1930s. This is inexcusable. I read one poor kid today on Twitter, detransitioner, was decrying his castration. Fancy that. And pointing out, for example, that, he's a young guy. He has no sexual drive whatsoever. And he said, well, what am I going to do? What have I lost? I can't believe I was so stupid as to have gone through with this. It's like, fair enough, kid. You probably should have woken up. But the people who facilitated that transformation, your therapists and your surgeons.
What happened to do no harm?
Yeah, right.
You should be able to just sue them, ideally. Shouldn't you? Shouldn't you be able to do that? They have insurance. Just sue them and look, you did this to me. You didn't follow a proper procedure. Well, I guess maybe they did follow a proper procedure. Maybe the procedure just sucks. So maybe you don't have basis. Look, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have one present anymore, so I can't give those inputs. It just yeah, I don't know what would just cause be, to sue them. But that would be ideal. Then if, whenever money is on the line, people are going to behave. They're going to be like, I don't want to lose this money, because if they get sued, and, even if the insurance does cover it, their insurance prices go way up, because they're like, well, look, you're costing us a bunch of money, so we got to increase your prices so the people will shape up. Or maybe just we need to change the rules, and it might be too late for this kid or other kids, and to put more stringent guidelines and say, look, we don't just do this. We have to follow these procedures to make sure, to the best of our abilities, that people are actually, going down the right path, because we don't want to be, harming individuals.
I should also point out, just so everyone is aware of this, surgeons are much more likely to be psychopathic than people in the typical profession. That's a well-documented phenomenon.
Because they like cutting shit. That makes sense to me. I don't know if this is true, but it makes sense, right? Like, who wants to go in to like cut somebody's body and like take out their liver and shit? I'm like, look at this heart, and there's like, I just imagine them when they're like operating because they're just like jiggling your innards and like, it feels so nice on my fingers. And it's only the other people in the room, you know, the nurses and stuff that are watching them. It's like, doctor, what are you doing? Why are you fingering his aorta? And it's like, look, calm down. He's like, oh, sorry, that was accidental. I don't know. Okay, I'm getting back to this. Has a boner. He's so into it. I just love the feeling of organs. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, doctors. I'm sorry, all the surgeons.
In the psychological literature. Now, it's not only surgeons, obviously. You see that in other professions as well. But if you happen to be sadistic and psychopathic, a profession that allows you to cut people up, and you think, well, there are no people like that. It's like, well, I think they just arrested some nurse in the UK for killing a bunch of babies in her psychopathic and sadistic manner. And so if you don't think there are people like that, you're naive beyond belief, and you better bloody well pray that you never meet anyone like that.
What nurse in UK killed a bunch of babies? What?
Because they're looking for someone just as naive as you to have their way with.
There are countries now that have outlawed surgery for minors, transgender surgeries for minors. Like I believe Sweden has.
They didn't exactly outlaw it. I got corrected on that claim by Community Notes on Twitter. Well, what?
She listened to her own dad's video and then repeated the claim back to him. Don't you hate when you do that? You're like, yeah, I heard this from somebody. You're like something that you remembered, and then you're like talking to the person who told you, and you know, because it's been like maybe a few weeks or months later, and then you're like, yeah, blah 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 this, and like, yeah, I told you that.
What happened was they've restricted surgery to minors to clinical trials, which is, you know, it's a detail. They've backtracked. There's no doubt Denmark, France, Sweden, the UK, Holland, the Netherlands, which is particularly relevant because that's where this gender-affirming surgical idiocy first made itself manifest. The Europeans have woken up to the fact that, well, you know what? Turns out that there's no evidence that sterilizing young people and cutting off their breasts makes them happier.
Really? Are you sure about that, Dr. Jordan Peterson? Because my boobs, I mean, you can cut them off. I'll probably be happier. I mean, they're only A cups, but I mean, you want to put those bags of seawater in there so I can get those nice pecs that, like, you know, you see men, they get bags of seawater or something. I don't know. Maybe it's not seawater.
Isn't that a shock?
Yep.
Sure is.
I think this is going to, this is an argument that has to be had right now. And there's going to be such pushback from people who have gone through these surgeries starting now. It's already happening.
Yeah. You had some more things to read from the decision.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of other, I don't know if they're funny, but there are a couple of other parts just to clarify what's going on. Is this decision that they've come to ordered Dr. Peterson as a registered member of the college to complete a specified continuing education or remedial program, a SCRP, regarding professionalism in public statements. The order is not disciplinary. It clarifies that here, and does not prevent. That's good, right? It's not a punishment. You just have to pay for things you don't want to do. Yeah.
Right. I have to pay for things I don't want to do. It's also not specified, so that what's specified is that I have to be retrained. What's specified in the specification is that I have to be retrained, regardless of how long that takes, until the people who are responsible for the retraining have decided that I've learned my lesson.
Yeah, but I also remember when reviewing this, is he had like a choice of a couple individuals that he could pick to be the person who would be retraining him and say, yes, I agree that you've met our standards, or whatever standard that person has who's training him. So you can pick your judge and jury.
Right. So don't tell me that's specified, and don't bloody well lie, you pikers, and tell me that that's not disciplinary.
You pikers?
How pathetic can you get? It's like, if you're going to come after me, why don't you bloody well admit that you're disciplining me, which is absolutely 100% obvious, especially because you're also claiming that I deserve to be disciplined.
Bend over, Dr. Jordan Peterson, and get your spanking. All right? How old are you? We'll do your age. You're like 61. That's 61 spanks.
You know, it's like claiming you're in favor of freedom of speech and then telling me that, well, except that, you know, you're a professional. And of course, we wouldn't want professionals to be able to, you know, tell the truth or say what they think, because everyone wants their professionals to lie to them, because that's how you get the best advice and guidance.
Do you think I go to the doctor and I'm like, hey, I'm feeling this way, you know, my head hurts, and they're like, you need this medication. I'm like, no, give me a natural remedy, bitch. Huh? You think you know some shit? There's people who are like that. And okay, maybe that's a weird one because it's like drugs and we don't want to take drugs. And we're like, hey, if I eat a banana, the potassium might help my headache. So we're like, we're trying to get around it. But so kind of we do. We just want you to tell us, do I have a brain aneurysm? Do I just have a normal headache? And then I'll deal with the resolutions after that. If it's real serious, I'll let one of your crazy sadistic surgeons come in there and cut out the tumor in my head or whatever, and fondle my brain. I was going to say my brain guts, but what is the technical? Just brains. Fondle my brains. Just don't eat them. You better not be a zombie.
Obviously.
Yeah. I think what shocks me about this is you are basically being brought to task over the Joe Rogan podcast, one of the Joe Rogan podcasts, which is insane. And over political tweets. Like it says right here, a tweet on February 19th in which Dr. Peterson commented that an Ottawa city councillor was an appalling self-righteous moralizing thing.
Mm-hmm. An appalling self-righteous moralizing thing. Yeah, well, I used thing because I didn't want to get in trouble on the pronoun front.
Oh, well, I don't think that.
Yes, because that's the way we refer to people in a way that doesn't get anybody upset. When you call somebody a thing, you know what, everybody, go home today, okay? Or if you're at home, go talk to somebody, or the next time you're in an argument with somebody, you know, you care about or whatever, just refer to them as a thing. Oh, you thing, how could you believe that? And see how they react. I'm sure they'll be fine with it.
That panned out well.
Well, we'll see. And so far, it's caused a certain amount of trouble. Okay, so there was the Ottawa City Councillor. Yeah. What other?
Tweet on January 2nd in which Dr. Peterson responded to an individual who expressed concern over overpopulation.
Yeah, because they thought in their complaint that you were telling people to kill themselves. That's what you were saying. They're free to leave whenever they want, because you were like, you're free to leave the planet whenever you want. How do I leave the planet, sir? By dying? No, you go on Elon Musk's spaceship, SpaceX. Jesus, man. He has a thing going to Mars. He needs people to go. Just do it.
That's how it's worded. And your response was, you're free to leave at any point.
The person actually said, just so we get this right, that there were too many people on the planet. Now, I'm not very happy with that statement at all, because I listen to what people say. And when people say, well, there should only be 500 million people on the planet because that's what the planet can sustain, I think, what do you plan to do with the other 7,500,000,000? They're inconvenient, are they? And what do you think they should be dispensed with? Just exactly what the hell are you saying? And if you think that there are too many people, well, what makes you so sure that you're not one of them, especially if you're the one that's concerned about it? You know, if the lifeboat is too crowded to float, maybe the morally appropriate thing to do is jump off, right? To save everybody else. Not to pretend that, Well, who is it? Is it the Africans who don't get to have fossil fuels, for example? Is it people?
Hey, you don't get to bring up the African thing, okay? I know we use that all the time. We're like, hey, you're throwing away that food? Kids in Africa could be eating this right now. You know, they're starving. How could you? We all love to use that. I think we need to be specific about where in Africa. There's a lot of places in Africa that are fine. At least that's my understanding. I remember talking to people from Nigeria, and they're like, you probably think we all live in huts and like lions and tigers attack us. And I was like, yeah. They're like, no, we have cities. Like big metropolises. It's not that bad. I'm like, okay. Yeah, just like in Canada, we don't live in igloos, guys. Okay? We do not live in igloos, nor do we ride polar bears, although I wish we did. But I do have a pet beaver. It's between my girlfriend's legs.
Is it people all over the world, the poor people who are multiplying so rapidly they're devouring the planet's resources? Should they all go? Yeah. And so I have absolutely no qualms whatsoever about calling someone out on it, especially when I'm doing it obviously ironically. Now, they actually said, the bloody college said, the complaint was I was counseling to suicide. Okay, yeah. Now really, who is stupid enough to think that?
That's exactly what they thought. It was like, hey, he's telling people, you can leave the planet. And I don't know. It's just the problem with the internet is that when you put anything online, especially the more popular you get, like Jordan Peterson's extremely popular, all these people watch it. And there's people out there who have no senses of humor, who are really dumb. And there's people out there who are really smart. And there's just average people. And there's people of like all kinds, right? So you're going to get some weirdos who are out there just be like, blah, like, how could you? You said I gotta kill myself. And I took offense to this. I think it probably take a bit more than that, though, to complain. You have to be like, well, you're that way. Like, oh, my God. And you don't like Dr. Jordan Peterson because he goes against one of your values or something like that.
Well, obviously, the Canadian College of Psychologists and the Canadian courts. So
yeah, there's another one that kind of goes along with that where you're clearly joking and that this is what they say. So this is from the Joe Rogan podcast. Speaking about air pollution and child deaths, Dr. Peterson said, it's just poor children and the world has too many people on it anyways, which is clearly
not a joke.
Sarcasm. That's in there though.
Yeah. Well, that's, and those are the, so just so everybody's watching and listening knows. So, you know, someone can take out a complaint by going and filling out a form at the Ontario College of Psychologists website. So if anybody out there is inclined to complain some more, just go ahead and do it. But the college doesn't have to pursue those complaints because they can define them as vexatious and just troublemaking, right? So it isn't even only that members of the public, the millions of people that I'm communicating with, let's say, are prone to complain, but that the college itself decided that that was sufficient grounds to threaten my license and to force me into re-education. Of course, they're not doing it for disciplinary reasons. It's like, what the? I don't even understand what that means. If you're not doing it for disciplinary reasons, it's like, why is it forced? And why am I being upbraided? That's like the definition of disciplinary.
It's just to confuse you. That's what it is. It's like when your parents are like, we're not mad with you. You know, let's say you stayed up too late or something, or you got drunk and you come home and you're like, we're not mad with you, but go to your room and you're grounded for a month. We're doing this because we love you.
So that just shows you how mendacious the decision is.
Yeah. And then it does go to outline that it's directed Dr. Peterson enter a coaching program with either one or two individuals identified by the panel to review, reflect on, and ameliorate his professionalism in public statements. The coaching program was to begin within 3 months and to be completed within 12. Costs associated with the coaching are borne by you. It also outlines that coaching doesn't end until you've successfully ameliorated your professionalism and learned something.
And what the hell is that supposed to mean precisely?
You better learn your lesson, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Learn your lesson. Whatever that happens to be. which is really whatever the person who's coaching you says. You can no longer wear these multicolored suits that look like you're some sort of Bond villain, okay? That's unprofessional. I'm sorry.
I'd need a whole personality transplant, apparently.
Yeah.
But there's another problem, too, there. And here's the problem. I'm not wrong.
Don't say it like that. It just comes off like you're one of those people that are like, how dare you? You're wrong. How could you say that? And then they're like, people just crossing their arms like, I'm right. I know we kind of said before, like, he could be wrong, and now he's saying he's not wrong, and has a lot of conviction. I admire the conviction, but I always think just try to keep the door open a smidgen, a little crack, because you never know. You could actually be wrong.
So that's a big problem. And I swear I will do this. If I am required to undergo the retraining, I will undergo the retraining. And I will tape it. And I will broadcast it. And then everyone else can decide. Then everyone else can decide for themselves just exactly what the hell's going on, and whether or not I've contemplated my words, whether or not I've thought through everything I say carefully, whether or not I have any grounds for my opinions. You know, I don't say things that I haven't thought about, and thought about a lot.
Unlike me, where I continuously say things I haven't thought about that much, and I shoot a lot of things off the cuff. So, to those people who believe me about the beaver thing, I would just say to you, look, it is true. That one is actually true, but the other things aren't. But the beaver thing is true. She does have a beaver between her legs, my girlfriend. And actually, it's quite beneficial with your periods and stuff, because they make dams. And so actually they help with the blood flow and any sort of the wetness that comes there. So pretty easy to look after, and you don't got to use tampons and pads anymore. Really helpful stuff. So you might want to consider getting one. I'll put the link for that down below.
And so I agree with Canadians that Justin Trudeau is the worst prime minister that the country has ever had. And I think he's actually far worse than people think. And I think that professionals in Canada no longer have the right to express their thoughts, which invalidates them as useful professionals. And I think they're pushed into a corner so badly that even the brave professionals I know, and I do know some, are unwilling to fight this, to even make public statements in support of me. And if you think that is the hallmark of a free country, there is really something wrong with you. You bloody well better wake up. And if you think that if that's happening to professionals, that it's not going to happen to you, well, you are exactly naive enough to deserve exactly what's coming down the pipeline for you.
Guys, I'm going to leave it there. There was a bit more to this video where he talks about some of the things that you could do to fight against this, or Canadians can do. So we don't just keep going this direction. I'll let you guys watch the video yourselves. I'll put the link down below. Otherwise, this video is going to be like 5 hours. Okay? Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy, still please like and subscribe. Because, I mean, come on. You'll enjoy the next one. Just trust in me. Trust in Surrwin. Trust in Surrwin. I don't know why I'm doing the sign of the cross.